In the summer of 1991, the city of Milwaukee seemed like any other American city. People worked long hours, neon lights flickered outside late-night bars, and strangers passed each other on quiet streets without much thought. Beneath that ordinary surface, however, something dark had been growing for years inside a modest apartment building on North 25th Street. Few people could have imagined that behind one of those doors lived a man whose actions would become one of the most horrifying criminal cases in American history. His name was Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer had always been a quiet, withdrawn person. People who knew him in passing often described him as polite, even shy. He spoke softly, rarely raised his voice, and seemed almost invisible in social settings. Yet behind that calm exterior existed a disturbing inner world that had begun forming when he was still young. His childhood had been marked by loneliness, isolation, and strange fascinations that others did not understand. As a boy, Jeffrey developed a curiosity about dead animals. He would collect the bones of animals he found in the woods and examine them closely, fascinated by their structure. What began as curiosity slowly turned into something darker. The fascination with death and control began to take root in his mind, shaping thoughts he never shared with anyone. Years passed, and Jeffrey struggled to build a normal life. He graduated from high school, but drifted aimlessly afterward. Alcohol became a constant companion. His relationships with family members were strained, and he found it difficult to connect with other people. On the outside, he appeared to be another troubled young man trying to find his way. Inside, however, his disturbing fantasies were growing stronger. In 1978, those fantasies crossed a terrible line. That year, Jeffrey encountered a young hitchhiker named Stephen Hicks. The two spoke briefly, and Jeffrey offered him a ride, instead of simply dropping the time. But when Stephen eventually said he wanted to leave, something inside Jeffrey snapped. He could not bear the thought of the other person walking away. In a moment that would haunt history, he attacked Stephen and killed him. Afterward, terrified and confused, Jeffrey tried to hide what he had done. He dismembered the body and disposed of the remains, convincing himself that the secret would stay buried forever. For nearly a decade after that first murder, Jeffrey Dahmer drifted through life. He moved between different cities, struggled with alcoholism, and continued to live quietly on the edges of society. On the surface, nothing connected him to that terrible crime from years before. But the darkness inside him had not disappeared. By the late 1980s, Jeffrey had settled in Milwaukee, living in a small apartment. It was here that the pattern began again. Late at night, he visited bars and clubs, searching for young men who might be willing to come back to his apartment. Sometimes he offered money in exchange for photographs. Sometimes he simply offered drinks and conversation. Once someone entered his apartment, however, the situation would slowly turn sinister. Jeffrey often mixed drugs into the drinks he offered his guests. When the victims lost consciousness, he carried out acts that revealed the disturbing depths of his mind. He was obsessed with the idea of control, of keeping someone with him permanently so they could never leave. Over the next several years, people began disappearing in Milwaukee. Many of them were young men who had last been seen in the neighborhoods Jeffrey visited. Families reported missing loved ones, and police received occasional tips. Yet the cases remained unsolved, scattered pieces of a puzzle no one had yet assembled. Inside Jeffrey's apartment, the evidence of his crimes slowly accumulated. Neighbors occasionally noticed strange smells coming from the unit. Some complained to the apartment manager, who asked Jeffrey about it. He calmly explained that his freezer had broken and some meat had spoiled. His quiet, polite demeanor convinced people not to ask too many questions. But the truth inside the apartment was far more horrifying. Jeffrey kept photographs documenting his crimes. He stored human remains in various containers. Some body parts were kept in the refrigerator. Others were hidden in closets or drawers. What looked like an ordinary apartment from the outside had become a place of unimaginable horror. Yet for years, the secret remained hidden. Everything changed on the night of July 22nd, 1991. That evening, Jeffrey encountered a man named Tracy Edwards. As he had done many times before, Jeffrey approached him with an offer. He said he would pay Tracy if he came back to the apartment and allowed him to take some photographs. Tracy agreed, thinking it was a strange but harmless opportunity to make some money. At first, the visit seemed normal. They sat together and talked. But soon Tracy began to notice that something was wrong. Jeffrey's behavior became increasingly unsettling. At one point, Jeffrey suddenly placed handcuffs on Tracy's wrist and began acting strangely, speaking about disturbing ideas and refusing to let him leave. Fear began to build in Tracy's mind. He realized he might be in serious danger. For nearly an hour, Tracy tried to remain calm, waiting for the right moment. Jeffrey moved around the apartment, distracted at times, while Tracy quietly planned how to escape. Finally, when Jeffrey briefly turned away, Tracy acted. He struck Jeffrey, broke free, and ran out of the apartment. Still wearing the handcuffs on one wrist, Tracy sprinted down the street and flagged down a passing police car. 2 officers stopped to help him, immediately noticing the panic in his voice and the handcuff hanging from his arm. Tracy told them that a man had tried to harm him inside an apartment nearby. At first, the officers were skeptical. Situations involving misunderstandings happened often, but Tracy insisted that something was terribly wrong. Reluctantly, the officers accompanied him back to the building. Jeffrey answered the door calmly when they knocked. He appeared polite and cooperative, explaining that the handcuffs were simply part of a misunderstanding between 2 adults. His relaxed manner nearly convinced the officers that nothing serious had happened. However, when one officer entered the bedroom to retrieve the handcuff key, something caught his attention. Inside a drawer were several photographs. The images showed human bodies in horrifying conditions. For a moment, the officer froze, trying to process what he was seeing. Then he turned to his partner and uttered words that would later echo through police history. "These are real." Within seconds, the situation exploded into chaos. The officers quickly restrained Jeffrey Dahmer as the horrifying reality began to unfold around them. A full search of the apartment soon revealed a scene that shocked even the most experienced investigators. Inside the refrigerator were human remains. In the closets and drawers were skulls and bones. Chemical containers and tools suggested attempts to preserve body parts. The photographs documented acts so disturbing that many investigators struggled to view them. The apartment had become a silent archive of Dahmer's crimes. News of the discovery spread rapidly across Milwaukee and then across the entire country. Reporters gathered outside the apartment building as police removed evidence boxes late into the night. Residents of the neighborhood watched in disbelief, unable to comprehend that such horrors had been happening just steps away from their homes. Jeffrey Dahmer was taken into custody and questioned by investigators. Surprisingly, he did not attempt to deny what he had done. Over the following days, he calmly described his crimes in chilling detail. He confessed to murdering 17 young men over the course of 13 years. The investigation that followed was massive. Detectives worked to identify victims, reconstruct timelines, and notify families who had spent years wondering what had happened to their loved ones. Each discovery brought new waves of grief and anger. In 1992, the trial of Jeffrey Dahmer began. The courtroom was packed with reporters, families of victims, and members of the public. The evidence presented during the trial revealed the full extent of the crimes. Photographs, forensic reports, and witness testimony painted a picture of a man whose actions had shocked the entire nation. Dahmer's defense attorneys argued that he was mentally ill and not responsible for his actions. Prosecutors insisted that he had understood exactly what he was doing. After weeks of testimony, the jury reached its verdict. Jeffrey Dahmer was found guilty on multiple counts of murder and sentenced to 15 consecutive life sentences in prison. The judge declared that he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. For the families of the victims, the verdict offered some measure of justice, though nothing could erase the pain of their loss. Jeffrey Dahmer was sent to a prison in Wisconsin. For a time, he lived quietly within the prison system, separated from other inmates for his own protection. Guards and staff reported that he often appeared calm and reflective, but his notoriety followed him everywhere. On November 28, 1994, Dahmer was assigned to a prison work detail with 2 other inmates. During that assignment, one of the inmates attacked him with a metal bar. Dahmer was severely beaten and later died from his injuries. The man whose crimes had horrified an entire nation was gone. Yet the story did not end there. The case of Jeffrey Dahmer remains one of the most disturbing criminal cases in American history. It forced communities to confront difficult questions about how such crimes could occur undetected for so long. It led to changes in police procedures, missing person investigations, and public awareness of serial crimes. For the families of the victims, however, the case is not simply a piece of history. It is a reminder of the lives that were lost and the pain that remains. In Milwaukee, the apartment building where the crimes occurred was eventually demolished. Today, the empty space stands as a quiet reminder of a tragedy that once unfolded there. The story of Jeffrey Dahmer is not just a tale of horror. It is also a warning about how darkness can hide behind ordinary appearances, unnoticed by the world around it, and it remains one of the most chilling chapters in the history of crime in the United States.